The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor's penthouse office, each drop a bullet of water streaking down the glass. He stood with his back to the room, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand, watching the city lights blur through the storm. At 32, he'd built an empire most men wouldn't dare dream of. Legitimate businesses fronting operations that kept the underground economy of 3 states running like clockwork. Ruthless, they called him. Merciless. The kind of man who didn't just win, he obliterated. His phone buzzed once on the obsidian desk behind him. Then again, and again, Victor didn't move. 3 buzzes meant Marcus, his second-in-command, for it would mean emergency. The 5th buzz never came, but Marcus appeared in the doorway anyway, his usually composed face tight with something Victor couldn't immediately identify. Concern? Intrigue? There's a woman downstairs, Marcus said without preamble. She's asking for you specifically. Says her name is Elena. Victor's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Elena. The name itself was unremarkable, common enough, but there was only one Elena who would dare walk into his building unannounced at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Elena Volkov, wife of Sergei Volkov, the bastard who'd been trying to encroach on Victor's territory for the past 18 months. The same man who put a bounty on one of Victor's suppliers 3 weeks ago, nearly starting a war neither of them could afford. The marriage had been big news in their world 2 years ago. Sergei, 48 and vicious, taking a bride barely 25, beautiful as a Renaissance painting and just as silent. Send her up, Victor said, his voice carrying no emotion. Alone. Search her first. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Victor finally moved, setting down the whiskey and buttoning his suit jacket. He was dressed entirely in black. Black shirt, black suit, even the Rolex on his wrist had a black face. It was his armor, his uniform. He'd learned early that looking like death itself had its advantages. The elevator chimed 5 minutes later. Victor had positioned himself behind his desk, the city sprawling behind him through the rain-soaked windows, a king on his throne. When Elena stepped into his office, he understood immediately why Sergei had married her. She was exquisite, not in the manufactured way of the women who usually grace these towers, the ones with obvious surgery and designer everything. Elena's beauty was natural, almost ethereal. Dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, damp from the rain. Her face was pale, delicate features that belonged in a museum. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, but it hung on her frame as if she'd lost weight recently. Dark circles shadowed eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green, like the sea before a storm. But it was those eyes that stopped him. They held something he recognized intimately, fear battling with desperate determination. Mrs. Volkov, he said, his voice low and controlled. This is unexpected. She walked forward with surprising steadiness, considering she was entering the lion's den. When she reached his desk, she didn't sit in either of the chairs across from him. Instead, she placed her hands flat on the polished surface and leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. I need you to kidnap me. Victor's expression didn't change, though internally he recalibrated everything he thought he knew about this woman. He'd assumed she was a trophy, a pretty ornament Sergei kept locked away. The boldness in her voice, even trembling as it was, suggested otherwise. That's quite a request, he said evenly. Perhaps you should sit down and explain why the wife of my rival is asking me to commit a felony. Because you're the only one powerful enough that he'll believe it, Elena said, but she did sit, collapsing into the chair as if her legs had been barely holding her. And because I've heard things about you. They say you're ruthless, but they also say you have a code, that you don't hurt civilians, that you keep your word. They say a lot of things. Most of them are designed to make people fear me. I'm already afraid, she whispered. Just not of you. The silence that followed was heavy. Victor studied her with the intensity that made most people squirm. He could see the barely healed bruise on her left wrist, just visible beneath her bracelet, the way she held her right side, as if breathing deeply caused pain, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. Your husband, he said, not making a question. Elena's laugh was bitter, broken. My husband, what a gentle word for what he is. Monster seems more appropriate. Devil, perhaps. He bought me, Mr. Victor. Did you know that? My father owed him money. Gambling debts. Sergei offered to clear everything if I married him. My father didn't even ask me. He just agreed. You could have run. Could I? Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. You know how this world works. You run. They find you. They make examples. My parents, my younger sister, he would have killed them all. So I married him. I smiled at the wedding. I played the perfect wife. And every day since, I've died a little more. Victor leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He should send her away. This was exactly the kind of complication he'd spent years avoiding. Emotions made people sloppy. Emotional decisions led to graves. But something about her pulled at a part of him he'd thought long dead. Maybe it was the courage it took to walk into his building. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Not with the calculation he saw in most people's eyes, trying to figure out how to use him, but with raw, honest desperation. Why not divorce? He asked, though he knew the answer. He'd never allow it. His pride couldn't take the humiliation. And even if somehow I managed it legally, I'd be dead within a week. You know that as well as I do. The only way I survive this is if I disappear. And the only way Sergei doesn't tear the world apart looking for me is if he thinks someone powerful took me. If he thinks it's about him, about revenge or territory, not about me wanting freedom. He'll start a war over this. Maybe, or maybe he'll see it as an excuse to do what he's want to do anyway. Go after you directly. Either way, I'll be free. That's all I want, just to be free. Victor stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. The storm was intensifying, lightning cracking across the sky. He could see Elena's reflection in the glass, watching him, waiting. She'd laid all her cards on the table. Now it was his move. If I agree to this, he said slowly, there are conditions. You'll do exactly as I say. You'll stay where I put you. You won't contact anyone from your old life. Not your family, not friends. No one. One mistake could unravel everything. I understand. I'm not doing this out of kindness. Elena, if I do this, it's because having you gives me leverage over Sergei. You become an asset, a piece on the board. Nothing more. He turned to face her, expecting to see hurt or disappointment. Instead, she smiled, a small, sad thing that didn't reach her eyes. I'd rather be a piece on your board than a prisoner in his cage. At least you're honest about what I am to you. Something in her words struck deeper than Victor wanted to acknowledge. He returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a burner phone. Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala at the Westmore Hotel. You'll be there with Sergei? Elena nodded. He never misses an opportunity to show me off. At 10:15, you'll excuse yourself to the restroom. Take the service corridor instead. Third door on the left from the main ballroom. My men will be waiting. They'll make it look convincing. Struggle. Scream if you need to. Sergei will have security, but we'll be faster. By the time anyone realizes what happened, you'll be gone. Where will you take me? The less you know, the better. If somehow Sergei gets to you before we're clear, you can't tell him what you don't know. Elena stood, and for a moment, she just looked at him. Victor found himself unable to read her expression. Gratitude mixed with something else. Resignation, perhaps, or the look of someone who just made a deal with a different kind of devil. Thank you, she said quietly. I know you don't want my thanks, that you're doing this for your own reasons. But thank you anyway. After she left, Victor remained at his desk long into the night. He told himself this was strategic. Sergei's weakness walking into his hands, an opportunity too good to pass up. But the image of Elena's eyes, the fear and hope warring within them, stayed with him far longer than strategy would explain. The next evening, Victor positioned himself across the street from the Westmore Hotel in a black SUV with tinted windows. He rarely got his hands dirty anymore. That's what people like Marcus were for. But tonight felt different. Tonight required his personal oversight. Through high-powered binoculars, he watched the gala attendees arrive in their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The cream of the city's upper crust, most of them blissfully unaware that half the men in that ballroom had blood on their hands. He spotted Sergei's arrival easily. The man traveled like a paranoid dictator, 6 bodyguards flanking him and his young wife. Elena looked like a different person than the woman who'd sat in his office. Her hair was swept up in an elegant style, diamond earrings catching the light. The dress was red, bold, expensive, but Victor could see the truth in her body language. The way she kept her distance from Sergei, the stiffness in her spine when he placed his hand on her lower back, possessive and controlling. Everyone in position? Victor asked into his comms. Affirmative, Marcus responded. Service corridor is clear. 2 teams ready. Extraction vehicle standing by. Victor checked his watch. 10:07 p.m. 8 minutes. Those 8 minutes felt like hours. He watched through the hotel's windows, tracking movement in the ballroom. At 10:14, he saw Elena excuse herself from conversation. Sergei's attention momentarily diverted by a business associate. She moved with purpose toward the back of the room. She's moving, Victor said. Stand by. Elena disappeared from view. Victor shifted position, watching the side entrance where his team would emerge. His heart rate, normally steady as a metronome, had picked up pace. Unusual, he was never nervous before an operation. The service door burst open at 10:17. 2 of his men emerged, moving fast, with Elena between them. She was struggling. Good. She remembered to sell it, her face showing appropriate fear. A 3rd man provided cover as they rushed to the waiting van. Then everything went wrong. Sergei's security detail poured from the hotel faster than anticipated. Someone had spotted them immediately. Shots rang out. Not aimed to kill. Sergei would want his wife back alive, but enough to stop the extraction. Go, go, go. Victor barked into the comms, but his team was already pinned down. He made a split-second decision that defied every rule he'd set for himself over the years. He threw open the SUV door and moved. Years of training made his body a weapon. He crossed the street in seconds, his own gun drawn. 2 of Sergei's men went down before they even registered his presence. The others scattered, confused by the new threat. In the chaos, Victor reached Elena. Come with me, he commanded, grabbing her wrist. Now! Her eyes widened in recognition, but she didn't hesitate. They ran together, his team providing cover fire. Victor practically threw her into his SUV, sliding in beside her as his driver hit the gas. Bullets sparked off the armored exterior, but they were already moving too fast. Everyone out? Victor demanded. All teams clear. Marcus confirmed through the radio. Heading to Rally Point Beta. Victor finally looked at Elena. She was breathing hard, her careful updo destroyed, 1 earring missing. A small cut on her cheek bled slightly. But her eyes, those eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been in his office. Adrenaline and something else. Freedom, perhaps, or the first taste of it. You weren't supposed to be there, she said breathlessly. You said your men would handle it. Plans change. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Just scared. That was more real than I expected. It had to be real. Sergei has to believe I took you, not that you ran. If there's even a hint you were complicit, he'll never stop hunting you. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to suburbs, then rural highways. The safe house was 2 hours outside the city, a property purchased through enough shell corporations that it would take months to trace back to Victor, if ever. Elena stared out the window, watching her old life disappear mile by mile. Victor found himself studying her profile, the elegant line of her neck, the way the streetlights played across her features as they passed. Why did you really agree to this? She asked suddenly, still not looking at him. And don't tell me it's just about leverage over Sergei. You could have used me a dozen different ways that would have been simpler. Victor considered lying. He was good at lying, had built an empire on knowing when and how to manipulate truth. But something about the quiet intimacy of the car, the darkness around them, made him honest. I saw myself in you, he said. Or who I used to be. Someone trapped. Someone desperate enough to make a deal with the devil to get free. I took a similar deal once, a long time ago. It cost me everything I was, but it gave me everything I am. I suppose I want to see if your story could end differently than mine." Elena finally turned to look at him. In the dim light, her eyes were unreadable. "Who were you before?" she asked softly. "Someone who believed in right and wrong. Someone who thought justice existed. Someone naive enough to think the system would protect him if he played by the rules." His smile was cold. "That person died 12 years ago in an alley in Moscow. What emerged was something else entirely. Do you regret it? Becoming what you are? Every day. And not at all. Regret is a luxury I can't afford." The safe house was an old farmhouse, isolated and unremarkable. The kind of place no one would look twice at. But inside, Victor had ensured every comfort and security measure money could buy. Reinforced doors, surveillance system, panic rooms, escape routes. Marcus and 3 other men were already there when they arrived, having taken alternative routes. The house was lit warmly, almost welcoming. Such a contrast to what it actually represented: a gilded cage, just a different one than Elena had left. "Your room is upstairs, second door," Victor told her. "Everything you need should be there. We'll establish protocols in the morning." Elena nodded but didn't move toward the stairs. "What happens now? How long do I stay here?" "Until it's safe. Weeks, maybe months. Sergei will tear the city apart looking for you, initially. He'll threaten me, possibly attack my operations. Eventually, he'll realize I'm not going to return you or ransom you. That's when it gets dangerous, when his pride is truly wounded. We wait out that storm, then we figure out next steps." "Next steps," she repeated hollowly. "You mean what you do with me after I'm no longer useful?" Victor stepped closer to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was tall, intimidating, used to people backing away from him. Elena held her ground. "I told you I have a code," he said quietly. "I meant it. You'll stay here, safe, until we can manufacture a new identity for you. Then you'll have a choice: stay in my orbit or disappear completely. Either way, you'll be free. That was the deal. Why should I trust you? Because trust is all you have right now. And because, unlike Sergei, I've never lied to you about what I am." Something flickered across her face. Acknowledgement. Perhaps acceptance. She nodded slowly and finally turned toward the stairs. Halfway up, she paused. "Victor, what you said in the car about being naive once. I don't think that person is as dead as you believe." Then she was gone, leaving Victor alone in the foyer with her words echoing in his mind like an accusation. Or maybe a hope. The next 3 weeks were a strange kind of torture. Sergei reacted exactly as predicted, with violence and fury. 2 of Victor's warehouses were burned. One of his clubs was shot up, thankfully after hours. The threats came daily, increasingly unhinged. Sergei wanted his wife back, wanted to make an example of Victor, wanted war. Victor responded with calculated restraint, defending his territory but not escalating. Let Sergei rage himself out. Let the other bosses see who was controlled and who was chaos. It was a long game, and Victor had always been patient. But patience was harder to maintain at the farmhouse. Elena was there, a constant presence that disrupted the careful emotional distance Victor maintained from everything in his life. He told himself he was checking on security, ensuring the safe house was functioning properly. But he found himself making the 2-hour drive 4 times a week. She was always reading when he arrived. The house had an extensive library. Victor was a collector of first editions, though few people knew this about him. Elena would be curled up in the window seat or by the fireplace, lost in Tolstoy or Marquez or Plath. She'd look up when he entered, marking her page, and something in his chest would tighten. "You don't have to keep coming," she said one evening, about 3 weeks in. Rain pattered against the windows again. It seemed to rain every time they were together. "I'm fine. Your men are professional. The house is secure. I'm not going to run." Victor set down the bag of groceries he'd brought. He never showed up empty-handed. As if provisions could justify his presence. "I need to discuss next steps. Sergei's attacks are becoming less frequent. He's starting to realize brute force won't work. That's not why you're here." Elena closed her book. 100 Years of Solitude, he noticed, and stood. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without the armored designer clothes and makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and somehow more beautiful. You could call about business. You come here for a different reason. And what reason is that? His voice was cold, defensive. The same reason I listen for your car every other day. The same reason I find excuses to stay in whatever room you're in. The same reason we're both pretending this is only about a business arrangement when we both know it stopped being that weeks ago. The honesty in her words should have alarmed him. Victor had built walls around his heart, so high and thick that nothing penetrated. Emotions were liabilities. Attachments were weapons people could use against you. He'd learned that lesson in blood and betrayal. But Elena wasn't trying to scale his walls or break them down. She was simply standing on the other side, acknowledging they existed, and waiting to see what he would do. "This can't happen," he said, but his conviction wavered. "You're under my protection. Taking advantage of that would make me no better than Sergei. Taking advantage would be if you forced this, manipulated it. I'm telling you what I feel, what I see in you every time you look at me when you think I'm not watching." She moved closer, and Victor found himself frozen. "You look at me like I'm something precious, something worth protecting for reasons that have nothing to do with strategy or leverage. You don't know what you're saying. This is transference, trauma bonding. You're confusing rescue with something else. I'm 27 years old, Victor, not a child. I know the difference between gratitude and—" She stopped, as if the next word was too dangerous to speak aloud. "I spent 2 years in a marriage where I was property, where every touch was about ownership and control. Don't insult me by suggesting I can't recognize something genuine when I feel it." Victor's control was fracturing. He could feel it, the careful discipline he'd maintained for over a decade, cracking like ice under pressure. "If we cross this line, everything changes. I can't think clearly around you as it is. If we—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Then don't think," Elena whispered. She was close enough now that he could smell the subtle scent of her shampoo, see the flecks of gold in her gray-green eyes. "For once in your carefully controlled life, don't calculate the angles or plan the outcome. Just feel." When he kissed her, it was with 12 years of repressed emotion, of walls crumbling, of something dead inside him gasping back to life. Her hands were in his hair, his arms around her waist, pulling her close as if she might disappear. The kiss was desperate, almost painful in its intensity. It tasted like rain and risk, and something terrifyingly close to salvation. They broke apart, breathing hard. Victor rested his forehead against hers, his hand still on her waist, grounding himself. "This is dangerous," he said, but he didn't let go. "Everything about our situation is dangerous. At least this is a danger I choose." That night, they talked until dawn. Not about strategy or Sergei or what came next, but about everything else. Elena told him about her childhood, about dreams she'd had before her father's debts had sold her future. She wanted to be a teacher, work with children, maybe write. Simple dreams that her marriage had buried. Victor found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone. About his sister, killed in the crossfire of a gang war when he was 20. About his parents, immigrants who'd worked themselves to death for nothing. About the moment he decided that playing by society's rules was a sucker's game, that the only way to survive was to become something feared. "You talk about that version of yourself like he's truly gone," Elena said. They were sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, the dying embers casting shadows across her face. "But he's still there. I see him every time you make sure the house has my favorite tea. Every time you ask Marcus about my comfort instead of just my security. Every time you look at me like I'm a person instead of an asset. That version of me is a weakness someone will eventually exploit. Or maybe he's the strongest part of you, the part that survived everything you've been through and still knows how to care." Victor pulled her closer, and she curled against his chest. For hours, they stayed like that, two damaged people finding temporary shelter in each other. But reality, as it always does, intruded. The call came at 4 a.m. Marcus, his voice tight with urgency. "We have a problem. Sergei knows where she is." Victor was on his feet instantly, Elena scrambling up beside him. "How?" One of our suppliers talked. Sergey has him, and apparently the man knew about the farmhouse from an old property acquisition deal. Sergey's moving now with at least 20 men. We have maybe 40 minutes. Evacuate everyone. I'm bringing her to the city penthouse. It's the most defensible position we have. Boss, that's where he'll expect. I know. That's the point. I'm done hiding her. If Sergey wants a war, he'll get one, but it will be on my terms. The drive back to the city was tense and fast. Victor had called in reinforcements, pulling men from every operation he had. Elena sat beside him, remarkably calm for someone whose sanctuary had just been compromised. You're going to fight him, she said. Not a question. I'm going to end this. One way or another. Tonight, it ends. He'll kill you if he can. You know that. Victor glanced at her, his expression hard. He'll try. But I've survived worse than Sergei Volkov, and I got something he doesn't have anymore. What's that? Something worth fighting for. The penthouse was a fortress. Victor had designed it that way, long before Elena had walked into his life. By the time they arrived, 30 of his most trusted men were already in position. Snipers on the roof, teams in the lobby, escape routes prepared. Sergei didn't make them wait long. He arrived with the subtlety of an invading army. Black SUVs filling the street, armed men taking positions around the building. Victor watched from his office window. Elena beside him. His phone rang. Sergei's number. I want my wife back. Sergei's voice was raw with fury. You give her to me now. We can end this without more bloodshed. She's not yours to take any more, Victor replied calmly. She never was. Really. You just convince yourself that ownership and love were the same thing. Love. Sergei laughed, harsh and bitter. You think this is about love? She's my property. My right. No one takes what's mine. I didn't take her, Sergei. She ran. She begged me to help her escape you. That's what your pride can't accept. That given a choice, she'd rather risk death than spend one more day as your wife. The silence on the other end was dangerous. When Sergei spoke again, his voice was ice. Then you've both signed your death warrants. I'm coming up. Either she leaves with me, or no one leaves at all. The line went dead. He's insane, Elena whispered. You should give me back. Let me end this. Victor turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. Do you trust me? Yes. Then trust me now. This ends tonight, but not the way Sergei thinks. He kissed her, soft and fierce, a promise and goodbye wrapped into one moment. Then he moved to his desk, picking up his phone one more time. Not to call Sergei, but someone else entirely. 20 minutes later, federal agents swarmed the building. Victor watched with grim satisfaction as they arrested Sergei and his men. The surprise on Sergei's face would have been comical under different circumstances. Elena stared at him in shock. You call the FBI? I've been building a case against Sergei for 6 months, Victor said. Trafficking, murder, extortion, everything I could document without exposing my own operations. I just needed one more piece to make it stick. Attempted murder of a federal witness. I'm not a federal witness. You are now. As of 3 weeks ago, actually, you've been providing testimony about Sergei's criminal operations through an intermediary prosecutor. All the abuse, all the crimes you witnessed, it's all on record now. Your testimony, combined with the evidence I've gathered and the very public attempt on both our lives tonight, it's enough to put him away for the rest of his life. You've been planning this the whole time, Elena said slowly. Since that first night in your office. I told you I'd get you free. I just didn't mention the method. The realization of what he'd done seemed to hit her all at once. But this puts a target on you. Sergei's organization will come after you for revenge. Let them come. I've been preparing for war with Sergei for over a year. His lieutenants are weak, divided. Without him, they'll tear each other apart within a month. And those who survive will know what happens to people who threaten what's mine. The word hung between them, mine, not in Sergei's possessive, controlling way, but something else, a claim and a promise. The FBI took hours processing the scene, taking statements. Victor had lawyers for days, people who made problems disappear. Elena was placed in witness protection temporarily, a formality until Sergei's trial. Victor used every resource he had to ensure her safety, calling in favors from people who owed him everything. 3 months later, Sergei was convicted on 17 counts. Life imprisonment, no possibility of parole. His organization had indeed collapsed, the power vacuum filled by people who wanted peace with Victor more than they wanted revenge. Elena's witness protection lasted only a few weeks after the trial. Victor had made sure she didn't need it anymore, that every threat had been neutralized. She returned to the city, a free woman for the first time in years. She found Victor in his office, the same office where she'd first asked him to kidnap her. He looked up when she entered, and the careful mask he wore for the world slipped just enough that she could see the hope beneath. "I hear you're a free woman," he said. "As free as someone can be in this world. Thanks to you. Thanks to yourself. You were brave enough to ask for help, brave enough to testify, brave enough to risk everything for freedom." Elena walked around his desk, the same path she'd taken months ago. But this time, when she leaned forward, it wasn't with desperation. It was with certainty. "I've been thinking about what comes next," she said. "I could disappear. New identity, new city, new life. Start over somewhere Sergei's shadow doesn't reach." "You could," Victor agreed carefully. "Is that what you want?" "No. What I want is to stay here. With you, if you'll have me." "Elena, I know what you are, what you do. I'm not naive about the life you live, or the dangers that come with it. But I also know what I feel when I'm with you. You make me feel safe and alive in myself in ways I've forgotten were possible. So I'm asking, can I stay?" Victor stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of her. He'd spent months telling himself this was temporary, that she'd leave once she was free, that attachment was dangerous. But looking at her now, he realized he'd been lying to himself. "I'm not a good man. Elena, I've done things. I'm not asking for a good man. I'm asking for you. The man who risked everything to save me. The man who looks at me like I'm precious. The man who reads Tolstoy at 3 a.m. and pretends he doesn't have a soft spot for stray cats." Despite everything, Victor smiled. "You notice that? I notice everything about you." She reached up, touching his face gently. "So what do you say? Can the ruthless mafia boss make room in his life for an ex-trophy wife with a teaching degree and too many opinions?" Victor pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her, feeling the rightness of her in his arms. "I think I can manage that. Though I should warn you, my life isn't safe or normal. There will always be risks, always be threats. Then we'll face them together. I'm done running from danger. I'd rather stand beside someone I trust and fight." He kissed her then, not with the desperate passion of their first kiss, but with something deeper, a promise of tomorrows, of a future neither of them had thought possible. Together, he agreed against her lips. "Though if we're doing this, there are rules." "Of course there are," Elena laughed. "You love your rules. No more secret plots to kidnap yourself. If you need something, you tell me directly. Deal. And you have to actually sleep occasionally instead of working 20-hour days. Negotiable. Also, we're getting a cat. I thought you pretended not to like them?" "I'm full of surprises." Outside the windows, the city sprawled before them, glittering and dangerous and full of possibilities. Victor and Elena stood together, two damaged souls who'd found something unexpected in the darkness. Not salvation, not perfection, but something real. Something worth fighting for. In the months that followed, Elena did pursue teaching, though at a private school that catered to children from difficult backgrounds. Victor funded an entire wing of the building, anonymously, watching with quiet pride as she bloomed into the woman she'd always meant to be. Their relationship remained private, known only to Victor's closest circle. The world still saw the ruthless mafia boss, cold and calculating. But Elena knew the man behind the reputation, the one who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, who listened to her stories about her students, who held her during nightmares when Sergei's memory wouldn't let her sleep. He was still dangerous, still ruthless in business. But with her, he was something else. Someone who'd remembered what it meant to care about another person more than power or control. One evening, nearly a year after Sergei's conviction, they sat together on the penthouse balcony. The city lights spread below them like fallen stars. Elena was curled against Victor's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Helping me that night? Everything that came after?" Victor considered the question seriously, as he did everything. He thought about the complications, the war with Sergei, the risks he'd taken. Then he thought about the woman beside him, the lightness he felt when she laughed, the sense of home he found in her presence. "Never," he said finally. "You walked into my office and asked me to save you, but I think maybe you saved me too." Elena smiled, tilted her head to look up at him. "We saved each other. That's how the best stories work. This isn't a story. It's messy and complicated and dangerous. So are all the best love stories. They just don't usually involve the FBI and rival mafia bosses." Victor laughed, the sound still surprising him after so many years of forgetting how. "I suppose that's true." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward light together. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Victor's world would always carry shadows, and Elena's past would always leave scars. But it was real, and it was theirs, and sometimes that was more than enough. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Victor saw them and smiled. It seemed fitting somehow. They'd weather whatever came, just as they'd survived everything that brought them to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked, noticing his expression. "About how you walked into my office in the rain," he said. "How terrified you were and how brave. How you looked at me like I might be your last hope. You were my last hope. My only hope, really. And now—" She shifted to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. "Now you're my choice. Every day I choose you. Not because I have to, not because I'm desperate or afraid, but because I want to. Because you're the man who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't try to change what he finds." Victor brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I spent 12 years believing I was incapable of this, that I'd cut out the part of myself that could love someone. You proved me wrong." "Good. You needed to be wrong about something. Your ego was getting insufferable." He laughed again, and Elena thought how different he looked when he laughed. Younger, lighter, almost like the person he might have been if life had been kinder. The first drops of rain began to fall, but neither of them moved to go inside. There was something cleansing about the rain, something that felt like absolution. It reminded them both of beginnings, of the night Elena had walked into Victor's world and changed everything. "I got a letter today," Elena said after a moment. "From my sister. She's in college now, studying art. My parents are doing better too. My father's been sober for 8 months. That's good news." "It is." She asked if she could visit, if she could meet you. Elena watched his face carefully. "I told her I'd ask you first. I know you value privacy." Victor was quiet for a long moment, considering. His instinct was always to maintain distance, to keep people at arm's length where they couldn't be used against him. But that instinct had been formed in a different time, when he had nothing to lose. Now he had Elena, and she'd come with family, with connections to the world beyond his carefully controlled empire. "Tell her she's welcome," he said finally. "Family is important. I should have learned that before I lost mine." Elena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you. You don't know how much that means. I'm beginning to understand. You're teaching me, slowly, how to be human again. You were always human, Victor. You just forgot for a while." As the rain intensified, they finally moved inside. Victor's phone buzzed almost immediately. It always did. The demands of his empire never truly silent. But for once, he ignored it. Instead, he pulled Elena close, swaying gently to music only they could hear. "Dance with me," he murmured. "There's no music. There's always music if you listen for it." They moved together in the quiet penthouse, rain drumming against the windows, the city alive below them. It was a moment stolen from time, from the demands and dangers that defined their lives. Just two people, holding each other, grateful for the storm that had brought them together. Later that night, as Elena slept beside him, Victor lay awake watching her. The moonlight through the windows cast silver across her face. Peaceful in sleep in a way she'd never been with Sergei. He'd given her that peace, that safety. The realization filled him with fierce, protective pride. His phone buzzed again on the nightstand. This time he picked it up Marcus, updating him on a shipment issue. Minor, easily handled. Victor typed a quick response and set the phone aside. But before he could settle back down, another message came through. An unknown number. His security system should have blocked it, which meant someone very determined had gotten through. Victor's entire body tensed as he opened it. Congratulations on your happiness. Enjoy it while it lasts. A friend. The message was vague enough to be dismissed as spam, but Victor knew better. Someone was watching, paying attention. A new threat, or an old enemy he'd thought neutralized. He'd need to investigate, quietly, without alarming Elena. But as he looked at her sleeping form, Victor made a silent promise. Whatever came, whoever was foolish enough to threaten what they'd built, he would handle it. He'd been ruthless before she came into his life, but now? Now he had something to protect beyond his empire. Now he had someone who made him want to be better, while giving him reason to be worse to anyone who posed a threat. The rain continued through the night, a constant rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. Victor finally allowed himself to sleep, one arm wrapped protectively around Elena, his mind already working through contingencies and plans. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own dangers, but tonight they were safe. Tonight they were together, and that, Victor realized as sleep finally claimed him, was worth every risk he'd taken, every rule he'd broken, every part of himself he'd exposed. Elena had asked him to save her, but in doing so, she'd save him from a life of cold calculation and empty victories. The ruthless Mafia Boss had found his redemption in the arms of the woman brave enough to ask for his help. And if the world thought that made him weak, they would learn soon enough that there was nothing more dangerous than a man who'd finally found something worth dying for. Because he would protect her, he would keep her safe. And anyone foolish enough to threaten her would discover that Victor's reputation for ruthlessness had, if anything, been an understatement. The storm raged outside, but inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Victor and Elena had found their shelter. And in a world as dark and dangerous as theirs, sometimes shelter was the closest thing to salvation anyone could hope for.